morning, Yoav, and everyone else who decides to come. I've got the first question, which is Yoav saying protocols are means of interface, interface between which parties. And now I will go to my previous stream to answer the question because it is, in fact, Mr. IC3 that talks about protocols. He may be referring to how I think he was hinting that I was being unfair to dub a certain guest, and I actually did have a bit of a conscience about it after I kicked him off for being of the mindset disposed to blame Jews, simply because I just don't think playing the blame game helps. What is the point of going on about Jewish banking when the solution is already it's already known to people who don't like usury, right? It is to ban usury with Sharia, and they can't go that extra step because they hate Muslims too, and this is why I get impatient with them. But right, let us go back to what IC3 says about the protocols. So he said 3 hours ago how IC3 analogy works. Because Claire Core is the originator and main public advocate of secular Koranism, her channel functions as a de facto seat of that idea's authority. So appearing here is not just going on YouTube, it is like visiting the capital of a conceptual state. And I really like this analogy by IC3, so thank you very much for it. Heading host equals head of state. Claire decides who is invited, what is discussed, and how it is moderated. That is the same as a head of state deciding who gets an audience and what protocol applies. Thank you, Mr. IC3. Next heading, channel equals embassy stroke capital. This chat, the moderation, the rules, the pin statements, that is a public protocol of secular Koranism. It shows what behavior is allowed, how dissent is handled, how outsiders are treated. Yes, it can be a bit according to my mood, because I am, I guess, absolute monarch of secular Koranism on my channel, because I can maybe if I'm in a bad mood, not be as patient as people who want to question it. To continue, next heading, guest equals visiting delegation. If you are invited on, that invitation is equivalent of a diplomatic note. Coming on the stream is the equivalent of a state visit. How you're treated here is a mini version of how a secular Quranist state would treat foreign visitors and minority views. So yesterday he was saying, I'm some kind of judge and I may have been unfair to Dob by so unceremoniously taking a dislike to his views and kicking him off. But I said, look, he's, welcome to come back and post about how I treated him badly and maybe I misunderstood him and his real position is XYZ or so I certainly wouldn't delete his comment. So he's very welcome to do that. Final two headings. Why this matters. One, it makes secular Koranism visible as something that can host and manage disagreement in public. Two, it shows whether the system is fair and consistent or arbitrary and personal. Three, it lets everyone see the political culture in action, not just in theory. Bottom line, Claire's channel is a current working of a secular Koranist state. Invitations here, state visits. Treatment of guests here, treatment of visiting delegations. So IC3 is the ambassador of well, whichever country he wishes to represent. I think he's Jamaican, or is he Trinidadian? I'm not sure, but he has this idea that reparations should be paid for Western imperialism. I don't quite agree, but he's always been friendly and reasonable, and I am very grateful to him for his suggestion of protocols and this analogy of state visits, and me being absolute monarch in my channel of secular Koranism. So obviously he's going to get special treatment because he's pleased me so much. So, and he's very imaginative and creative about these ideas. Now, I want to play for you the exchange Dob and I had before I kicked him off. So, just to be fair to him, maybe I was a bit impatient. Maybe I was right to be impatient, maybe I was wrong to be impatient. But here we are. Let us play that scene just before I kicked him off. Let me just check the audio levels and everything on max. Right, this begins a bit before he joins.
And then nobody goes into that cave, and they just don't do it. But it's only when the white man comes and he goes into that cave and he does some experiments and says, "Oh, there's gas in there." So some poisonous gas in there, and so that's why it's killing. But the people, they just didn't go into the cave, but they never researched into why they don't go into that cave. Something happened a very, very, very long time ago, and they're protected.
Okay, so they're
from being
ignorant and
poisoned.
unscientific. So what?
It's unscientific, correct?
Just to give you a bit of background, IC3 was talking about religion being the traditions of a people, and he meant African people, and he said African people might have a tradition of not going into a particular cave, and then as you can see, as you can hear, he's talking about the white man comes to Africa, the white man explores this cave and says the reason why black people might not go into the cave was because they would die because of poison gas, which can be dealt with using scientific means. Let us continue. That's not the main point of the discussion, but let us continue.
But it keeps them alive, and it's real.
There are lots of stupid people that are still alive. What?
Yeah.
I mean, surely we're just choosing. There are only 5 world religions, right? I mean, why do you seem to want to choose some obscure one that nobody's heard of? So people will just say, we've never heard of it. Who cares? I mean, I just don't, I don't understand.
Yeah, so a world religion, you see, so it's similar to what you're saying, that you're saying there's secular Koranism, and then you can all interpret it according to your own regional ways, but that's our center. What the Africans are saying, that they interpret the world, they interpret nature according to their own experience.
Yeah, let them interpret it in their own way. If they interpret in a crap way, then I guess they'll just be weak and be exploited by the people who interpret it properly. I mean, we don't know, who will interpret it most correctly, right? I mean, but obviously, if you're going to believe in the system, you should follow it properly. You've been given an instruction manual. Either you choose to follow it or don't follow it. But if you're going to follow it, you must all do it properly.
Mhm. And this manual, you
Lots
see,
of Africans are Muslims, so I don't know why.
yeah, but they see that they see that as that it's Abrahamic ideas or
Okay, so
versions of
they don't like
Abrahamic
it.
ideas.
A lot of people don't like the Abrahamic God because it's
Yeah,
too totalitarian. It's like fine, you make up stuff. You have your own religion, but there is no advantage in having a new religion because you're just a new kid on the block. It's like, who are you? Never seen it before. You've just come up with some newfangled thing. We prefer our old religion, and it's because it's been around for a long time,
yeah.
right? So that's a thing. It's you won't have time to come up with your own religion and then see it to its conclusion because when you think about it, like, well, when did Jesus die? In the first century. When did the Romans adopt it? In the fourth century. So do we want to wait all this time?
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's like saying we're going to wait for our society or civilization to crash and burn before we adopt this. But the thing is, if it's a new religion, you're going to be treated like a cult, right? And cultists get no respect. They're always, kicked around and mocked and marginalized and demonized. So there is no advantage in having a
So
new
so
religion.
Christian Rome has got respect then.
Well, I think they still sort of do because they represent the most powerful empires still. But they could do it, peacefully, right? They could sort of say, well, nobody really believes that Jesus is God anyway. And Islam, well, it um, they could say Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are worship the same Abrahamic God. Right, and they'll obviously think they're the best and most correct, but well, is
They
there a
worship
way
the
of working
same.
it out?
What is this Abrahamic God? Worship the same Abrahamic God.
Well, you would want to choose the most powerful being conceivable, right? You don't want to be worshipping your kind of low status God, and then somebody says, "Well, my God is more powerful than your God, so we're going to win."
So see, the most powerful God conceivable, you said. Um, so whoever happens to be the strongest, the best fighter, but being the best fighter might not necessarily mean you have the best society because it could mean that you just
Time will
you,
tell.
exactly you just cause a lot of havoc and then you fade away, whilst there's other people that could, you beat them up for a while but they just outlive you until you fade away. But
Well,
with all this,
so it depends on the longevity of your identity.
right,
So your empire, the
yeah,
longevity of your empire.
yeah, and therefore the whoever has the longest empire um has the proper worship form of worship for the Abrahamic God. So the Abrahamic God is changes according to the strength of the people that are serving it.
No, it's about following rules, right? It's
Yeah, but you
about
keep making up rules because you can just say, "Oh, the Abrahamic God, it's out there," and then you just keep making up different rules. Everybody's making up
no,
rules, and
they
then whoever's
haven't.
the strongest rules,
Okay, the Quran. Are Muslims fighting over the wording of the Quran? I don't think so.
they're fighting over the interpretation of it.
Yeah, but they're not fighting over. Oh, they're not fighting over what the Quran says. They might be fighting over the interpretation. But okay, that's the best we can do. We'll just have to follow it to the best of our ability. right? We don't have to follow it in that crap way that's caused their caliphate to crash and burn. We don't have to follow it in that crap way. We can do better, can't we?
Right. So therefore, it sounds as the Quran, just like the Abrahamic God, it's just that thing there. But it's just up to you. It's just like an abstract thought, and depending on how an idea, and then depending on how strong you are and your longevity, you define what that entity is. Just because you're stronger, and you say, yeah, we define what the Abrahamic God is because we've been around longest and we got the best weapons. So you must accept our interpretation or construction of
So
the Abrahamic God.
doesn't it kind of seem as if it is a mafia like agenda with Islam for sure? It does seem that way to me because they're all arguing over everything. They've seemed to have stolen these past scriptures and just replaced it with other same characters but different results and different stories. And then they have their own laws, so you have to go walk over to this guy because he's your boss now or something, and he owns the whole town, and if you don't do what he says, he's going to cut off your hand or something. To
Yeah,
me, it's just I don't know if you guys, that's kind of where I'm.
100%. Yeah, the Pope is basically the Godfather. I mean, the Godfather, the movie. That's it. That's the Pope, isn't it? The Pope is the Godfather.
Well, the Pope, that's a different story. I mean, because what I'm talking specifically with Islam, it's like there's verses. Okay, so you have Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and supposedly Isaac is this. That's the blessing goes through Isaac, right? And then in the Quran, it's a different genealogy.
Ishmael.
Ishmael, yeah. So then, but then there are other verses, and I see why
It
they would
doesn't
want to do
matter. It
something.
does none of this matters. It's stupid shit, right? What's your
But it
problem
does.
with it,
But
Dub?
okay. But the problem is you can say something like that, and you can try to bury your head in the sand, but it is a problem that will not go away.
What
So it
is the
needs to be
problem?
addressed.
What's the problem, Dub?
So something like the UK, right? It's kind of being overrun by people who are not from there, and they are just dominating as far as I can see. So
Yeah,
that's a
and you're
problem.
American, and you have plenty of immigrants too, right?
Yes.
Okay, so where are your immigrants from?
Our immigrants are from all over the place. Specifically, if you could be talking about, I guess there's a place in Michigan or something like that, Dearborn. We have a huge problem there. But what I'm trying to say is, if you just bury your head in the sand and
I'm not
say,
burying
"Oh,
my
well,
head in
it's
the
all just,"
sand. So what you're
no,
saying is,
hold on. Like, I'm not trying to like be a troll or anything here. Get an emotional response from you. I'm trying to.
yeah,
If
please
you
get
just
to the point quickly, please.
Yes, if you just turn your head the other way and pretend that it's not an issue that needs to be addressed, you're in big trouble.
What are you referring to? Immigration?
Well, no, I'm referring to the fact that you basically say it's all fairy tales and it doesn't matter.
I'm,
You see?
so I'm saying it's easier to just look at the rules and say these are the rules I'd rather obey compared to the other lot. And I'm saying there's a Torah, it's for Jews, and there's a Quran, it's for Gentiles. So what's the problem? You Christian?
And yeah, I'm Christian, so
Yeah,
the
yeah. So
Quran.
you're an idolater, right? You
No,
worship Jesus, right? You worship
that's
Jesus
yeah,
as
okay.
God, which is
It's fine
stupid, right?
if you want to go there, but now we're
Yeah, I want to
sidetracking
go
from
there
the main
because I'm saying
conversation.
it fundamentally it's stupid and it's idolatry and it's forbidden by God. But if you want to carry on, and just you're not even a Christian country, right? America is not a Christian country, so why are you arguing about God with us?
I'm not
Do you want to
arguing.
be a Christian nationalist? Do you want to be a Christian
Okay.
republic?
Did you want to go on, or would you like me to respond? Come on, man.
Okay, what is your point?
The point is, as you said, something to the fact of they're all just fairy tales anyways. But the fact of the matter is, in reality, if you think that way and you just want to turn your head away and not pay attention to it, you're going to get taken over. I think that's like pretty plain and simple. Those are facts, right? Can we
Yes,
agree there?
so I'm saying
Okay.
because the West does not have a religion, it's being taken over by people who have a religion. So people in the West are always complaining about the Jews, complaining about the Muslims, right? So what's your
Mhm.
problem? You don't really believe in your religion. You don't. You don't really even believe in God.
Hold on.
It's just a, oh, well, I'm just
Whoever.
a Christian.
Okay.
And
Whoever said that, don't troll me right now. You're looking for like an emotional response, and you're not going to get one. However, the fact remains. Actually, England is supposedly a Christian country, is it not?
yes, but
Well,
it's only nominally Christian because most British people, they don't take it seriously at all. They don't believe in God. They
I
certainly don't
think
believe Jesus is God.
the real temples, I think the God, I think that you can tell who God is by the worshippers and the temple where they worship gives you an insight of where the God is. So the Jews, you'll see them worshiping their idea of God when you go to their um what do they call it again?
Synagogue.
Synagogue. That's right. And then the Muslims you'll see when you go to their and so on and so on. So here's my challenge. I'm saying that all of the Abrahamic faiths have been taken over by another faith, and that faith, the temples are the banks. So when you go to a bank, there's rituals, to put money in and take money out. Your ID is got to be very clear and so on.
Okay,
And
they
so
worship Mammon. We get the point. Now, Dub, what do you mean by Abrahamic religions as a fabrication? Are you a
Well,
neo-pagan?
I mean, he was kind of getting at a good point right there. Let me
It's
add to
just like
that just a
everybody
little
who
bit.
loves money and they worship Mammon. Okay, I get
Hold
it.
on, no. Okay, hold on. Can you not cut me off, please? I know you guys own the channel, whatever. Whoever's the channel owner is
Just
that.
get to
But
the
I'm
point,
trying.
right? Get to the
I,
point.
I'm
Don't
I'm
complain.
trying. Unfortunately, I cannot snap my fingers, and you automatically just obtain it in your brain. All right,
Get to the
slow down.
fucking point.
Ah, well, the point is this. Okay, so it's interesting because he's saying that these places are just collecting money and things like that, and maybe there is a sense of a mafia type uh, um, organization within a Jewish community. Oh, they only want to deal with Jews. They're only going to do business with other Jews until they gain a certain
Okay,
amount, and then they're like,
it's the Jews again,
we
right?
have a
Okay, so the
monopoly.
Jews are
Hold on.
all
Can you
powerful,
please
and you can't
can
do
you please
anything
fucking
about it
hold
because of
on
the
for a
bankers.
second? Can you stop acting like a cunt and just hold on for a second, okay?
Get to the
So
fucking point. You're
in
blaming the
Islam,
Jews
it's
again, right?
kind of
You're
like,
blaming the
hold
Jews, no?
on, quit being a cunt.
Hold on. You can't get to my
come on, man,
point.
you two.
All right, so
Let's use the
it's
word
kind of the
Okay,
same.
civilization.
so we
So
get it. He
listen,
blames the Jews. He blames the Jews, right?
Give him a chance to do it. Then. Let's hear him do it. Let's hear if he's going to
He
do it.
just said Just said blah blah blah. The Jews only do business with each other. He sounds a bit stupid, to be honest. I still want to be Christian, even though Christianity has, not protected me against those Jews and Muslims.
Right. Okay.
And,
You've
and
heard
that's
that
it. And
before.
maybe um,
Right.
So ultimately, you need to choose a religion to protect you from the other people with a religion, right? So if you can't beat them, you have to join them, unless you want to, come up with something stupid like neo-paganism. And the really stupid thing about neo-pagans is that you ask them, so what's your pagan pantheon, and they can never tell you. It's like, no, we hate Jews, so we reject Judaism. We hate Muslims, so we reject Islam. Oh, and we reject Christianity because Christians worship a Jew. So we have to be neo-pagan, but we haven't, come up with anything. Oh, there's the Greek pantheon, but, they're all extinct. There's the Nordic pantheon who want to worship, Odin and Wotan, and it's like, yeah, that's all they have, right?
Actually, you made me think of something when you said, going back to the earlier points in the conversation, we talked about
Okay, do you think I was being unfair to Dub? I don't think so. I was, I gave him a chance, and then, it's about Jews again. So, well, you can protect yourself against Jews as a Gentile by adopting Sharia. And Jews can help themselves by saying, we can be protected from Gentiles hating us if Gentiles had better government under Sharia. So they won't feel so threatened and angry and fearful and hate-filled. And that is a reason. Because, okay, whether or not you believe in God, it seems that Gentiles are programmed to blame Jews when they suffer from bad government. Maybe it's not just Jews, they'll just, the dominant group of Gentiles will start taking it out on the minorities when the government, when they suffer from bad government. So in China, I mean, you could actually blame Jews for the civil war in China and the Cultural Revolution in China because, Marx was a Jew. Even though his parents converted to Lutheranism, he will always be considered a Jew. There's no escaping it. He even had a secular education. He denied the existence of God. He mocked religion as the opiate of the masses, but people can only concentrate on him having some Jewish ancestry. Maybe people will just hate whoever is smarter than them, whether they're Jewish or Gentile. I'm certainly saying it's not the way to go, because then you will just hate anyone who has more than you, and you want to, kill them and deprive them of their property just because they happen to be doing better than you. That way lies a race to the bottom where, smart people have to pretend to be stupid, and people will have to hide their wealth or not even acquire any. It will be very brutish. So I don't agree with blaming anyone who isn't actually responsible for your thing, for your misfortune. So IC3 was actually saying maybe scapegoating is a Jewish idea and therefore something approved of by God. I disagree, because scapegoating has not helped the Jews. You will find a reference to scapegoating in the Old Testament and how it was done. The goat would be carrying the sins of the Jews, and then it would be pushed off a cliff or something like that. And then, people would feel better. But, the poor goat, it didn't do anything. And of course, the sins have not really been expiated. And then when they all moved to New York, they thought, well, we can't do the goat thing anyway in an urban surroundings, so we'll do the scape chicken thing, which is kaparot. So they would, swing the chicken and then kill it, and then not know what to do with the chicken, because actually, to make the chicken desirable, you'd have to butcher it, you'd have to gut it and take the feathers off, and it's a long, involved process that only butchers know how to do. And I guess most New Yorkers just said, well, I can't be bothered with that. So I'll just leave it to rot. And of course, that practice has created more anti-Semitism because of this disgusting practice. I believe now in New York, they, instead of, twirling the chicken round the head of the Jew. They twirl $20 bills to, take the place of the chicken and give it to charity or whatever. So, and I was saying, that's not a very clever thing to do, right? Can't you just work out as a Jew that your scapegoating of this poor goat didn't stop you from getting kicked out of Israel, didn't stop you from sinning. You just pretended that the goat was responsible for your sins, and actually it was still, in you, and you were still going to get punished for it. So there are a number of clues that tell you not to scapegoat people. I perhaps didn't manage to make the point very clearly to IC3, and I'm glad of the opportunity now. I'm really quite happy to give Dub all the time he wants to post in the comment of the previous stream, or even this one, to say, I completely got him wrong. Now, I'm going to be charitable and try to steelman what he was trying to say. So he was saying, we can't ignore the Jews and Muslims, because if we do, they're going to take over. Yes, I think that was what he was trying to say. You can go back to it if you don't agree. And then later he was talking about a Jewish banking mafia. And this was finally, this was the last straw. It's like, okay, you don't like usury, you don't like Jewish banking, you can ban it with Sharia. In fact, Hitler, before he became Chancellor of Germany, wanted to ban all forms of gambling, including the international stock market, which he said was an international casino. Muslims would have a problem with the international stock market, and borrowing and lending on interest, which is what treasury bonds are. The bond market is basically lending and borrowing on interest. And obviously when that went wrong, the Wall Street crash, it caused a lot of suffering. Some of us may remember cartoons of the Wall Street crash in 1929, all these rich people jumping off tall buildings because they couldn't face being poor. So I will continue making the point that any historical misfortune of the West can be attributed to not being rightly guided by the Quran. I'm happy to treat this as a game. You think of a historical tragedy suffered by Westerners in America, Europe, or Australia, and I will be able to attribute that suffering to failure to follow the Quran. How about that? That's going to be one of the protocols. So somebody was asking about excuse me, why Jews are arguably the evidence that God exists. So I have posted in a chat a link to that 10 or 12 minute video explaining why this is. And I can also tell you what I can remember of it, which is that you would have thought that Jews would be extinct by now because everyone hates them and keeps wanting to cull them, but they're still around, and therefore they must be protected by God. And and look at all these Gentiles with their empires, particularly the Christians with their global empires, and even now they are whinging about Jews. And you would have thought that Christianity, being the top dog religion of the top dog empire, you'd be thinking they'd be flying high and walking tall, but they're still moaning about Jews. Now, I will empathize with them and say, and obviously they complain about Jews because their government is bent on protecting Israel, and also give Jews more privilege over, that they privilege Jews over Gentiles in that they make a point of protecting Jews from being offended by comments made by people who criticize and insult them. And I'm saying this is actually inevitable if they want to continue the mythos of Uncle Sam taking on the white man's burden of protecting the Jews. To give the appearance of protecting Jews, even though some Jews, such as the late Rabbi Sykes, was saying, "You're privileging us too much. You're just going to make them hate us even more by privileging us so much." And I think he may have even mentioned the story of Abel and Cain, saying that Cain killed Abel because God accepted Abel's sacrifices but rejected the ones of Cain, and that was a cause of fratricide. So, that seems a very sensible point. But Western governments will continue privileging Jews because they want to continue the mythos of America, Uncle Sam being the good guy who will protect Jews and Israel against the ever-present anti-Semites who want to kill them and destroy Israel. But I think it is just a mythos. They're not doing it out of the goodness of their heart. All empires need a raison d'etre to exist, and it can't just be, we run the world because we are the people with the biggest guns and the biggest bombs and the biggest armies and the biggest aircraft carriers, and nobody can best us in weaponry and the organizing force to control the world. So that is the mythos, and I keep saying the word mythos so people will finally get the point of gangsters, even gangsters, and let's admit it, countries with no supreme court or police force will always behave like gangsters. We know the British sold drugs to the Chinese, right, in the Opium Wars. That's how they roll. I'm not saying that they're the only ones who behave badly. I'm sure others have, but let's stick to what we know and what is relevant. And it is that unless we are policed or obey or agree to obey certain rules, we will do whatever we think we can get away with. And obviously, the atheists will think they can get away with murder because they don't think God exists to punish them for anything. So that's a given. But then there are these hypocrites who pretend to believe in God, and they pretend to believe in God to, be seen as better people than what they really are, about a bunch of gangsters helping themselves to the property of others and killing them. Because they want the mythos. They want to believe that, the British are gentlemen whose word can be secured on a handshake, the sort of idea of being run by aristocrats, and the aristocracy are to be admired and respected because of their superior morals compared to the hoi polloi. So we have to understand the mythos of what the American empire wants to project and wants its own people to believe in, and the other world, the other parts of the world to at least be polite about, I suppose. So why was I so impatient with Dub? Because he's just going back to the whole thing like, okay, the Jews, he probably never liked them, right? He was talking like a white nationalist. And the thing about these white nationalists is that they're not great readers. Dub probably was better than most. He didn't sound, completely stupid. He tried. He tried to present an argument. It didn't. Okay, maybe I didn't give him a chance, but I could see where he was going, and in the end, I guess I wanted to continue talking to IC3, and I'm glad we continued because maybe I was in a bad mood. Who knows? But what I don't want to be doing is to play the blame game. I want to solve the problem. When the roof leaks, don't round everybody up on the property and ask them if they're Jewish. Just call the roofers and then solve the problem sooner rather than later. That is my attitude. So if he identified as Christian, well, actually he did identify as Christian, then I'm saying, that's your problem. Christianity is your problem. You think it's going to work, but it failed a long time ago. And because he's American, he of all nationalities should understand. It's like, why did the founding fathers separate the church from their state? Why? But if you ask the average American, they say, oh, it was the Freemasons. And they talk about Freemasons like they're a bunch of Jews, right? And they shouldn't have, and whatever. And then you realize that they don't even understand their own history. So the great thing about the American Republic is that, I guess, without realizing it, it is in fact paving the way of the West towards Islam, because it will, if it ever corrects itself, and I think it can only be a matter of time. Let us hope America will correct itself before things get much worse for all of us. So the whole point of having a constitution is, as a republic, if you're being sensible, you're no longer an absolute monarchy, because the whole point of an absolute monarchy is that the king can take away anyone's life or property or rights if he chooses. So over time, there was some resistance amongst the aristocracy, setting up parliaments and saying, look, you can't just come and take our stuff and throw us in jail and execute us without due process. We demand that you give us justice and give us certain rights that you can't just take away without even consulting us. So that was a history of Parliament. We know that the English had a bit of a problem with Charles I, who was beheaded, and for 10 years England was a republic. But since Cromwell died after 10 years and his son wasn't up to the job, the monarchy was restored. But perhaps the reason why the English kings were less tyrannical was because of the knowledge of what the people could do if they were really, really riled about the king's ability to give good government. So for the English Civil War, it was really Charles I wanting to impose a tax called ship money without consulting the barons, and they said no, and and the rest is history. And Christianity has always been a problem for Europeans. It's been a problem for 500 years, except that they don't know it. And you talk to them, and it's like, oh yeah, but what was it, the Reformation? And we don't care about these things anymore. We're just not bothered about Catholics being Catholic and Anglicans being Anglican. And I'm just saying, look, a lot of people got killed. We may not care about these things now, but there was a reason why so many people cared. And obviously, the kings cared about whether they could interpret their own scripture under the rules of sola scriptura or submit to the Pope in Rome. Obviously, it was immensely political. And when the European wars of religion broke out, it was because they couldn't agree on that. But then, now that we're supposedly a democracy operating under a new religion of liberalism, of course, the British monarch can go and pray with the Pope, and it's not a big deal because nobody cares what you do because you're just ceremonial, right? You are just performing a ceremonial role. You have no real power. The real power lies behind who sponsors, who bankrolls political parties so that they can buy propaganda on media outlets to persuade us. And outlets include YouTube and any social media platform, as well as legacy media or radio and TV. So we should have a care because we're getting our information. We're all getting our information from somewhere. And some of us will have very strong views about the truth of whether God exists or not. I try to make it as uncontroversial as possible because I think even atheists can agree that there are certain uses to religion, which is a form of mind control. And if any atheist were to say that to me, I would happily agree that our governments want us to do things. They want us to pay our taxes. They want us to do the work that needs to be done to keep the country going. And they want us to produce the next generation and parent them properly so that they too can become productive citizens who will carry on the existence of the nation. So this is pretty universal and generic, and obviously if you're going to want to breed your citizens, you will need them to respect the rules of marriage. And once upon a time, any country that had a rational government fit for purpose would support the institution of marriage, and that is why all the 5 world religions you have heard of, the 3 Abrahamic religions and the 2 Eastern religions of Hinduism and Buddhism, are not going to be gay friendly or submitting or simping to sluts, right? Only liberals in the West think it's okay to enjoy a culture of casual sex. And I'm saying, this is a problem. That's why your birth rates are declining, and that's why the quality of your parenting is also leaving much to be desired, shall we say, compared to other countries who actually respect marriage. And the Chinese are in trouble because in Sichuan province they have decided not to discriminate against unmarried parents. So this mind virus, this cancer of the mind and culture is spreading everywhere. It's not just Westerners who are suffering it. We know that even in the Gulf kingdoms that they're also having lots of gay sex and sex outside marriage, and we know that the Gulf kingdoms are going along with the liberalizing of Islam. So it's going to be not very good for the human race who decide to pursue who prefer the Whig interpretation of history. The Whig Interpretation of History is a book by H.M. Butterfield, and it's basically saying, after becoming liberals, life is getting better, isn't it? And then this tradition, this of the Whig interpretation of history, was continued by Francis Fukuyama in The End of History, and he was saying the end of history is when the world is globally a liberal democracy, and we will all live happily ever after. And obviously, he got that wrong. But I'm trying to tell you that liberalism has become our religion without us even knowing it, without us even being officially informed of it, right? In Britain, there was something called fundamental British values, which was pushed through schools and the public consciousness in 2010 to 2015. And I know how pervasive it was that even Muslims in the East End who were complaining about the government were saying, but these fundamental British values, they're ours too, because it was framed in such uncontroversial terms. It means tolerance for others, tolerance and respect for others, the rule of law. I'll read it out to you, actually. But it's sort of like motherhood and apple pie-ism, right? So that is no longer, Anglicanism is no longer the official British religion with the 39 articles forbidding so many things. It is now fundamental British values, which is couched in such gay terms that so vague and gay, right? Fundamental British values are defined by the UK government as democracy, the rule of law, individual liberty, mutual respect, and tolerance of those with different faiths and beliefs. Right? That's it in a nutshell. That's not enough, right? It's obviously not enough, but the government just wants us to think, it's promoting things that no decent person could disagree with, and to an extent that most people, apolitical people, would not disagree with any of this. They have succeeded, but it's more than that. You have to have do's and don'ts. We are the people who have a certain history, and we believe in X. We always do Y. We never do Z. It's got to be more than just this vague statement, and that's why we need a religion, not just the British, but anyone who has a country to run or to live in. We want people to agree to not kill, not steal, not commit sexual immorality, to some animal rights, right, to make us feel decent people. To have the rule of law being administered by the court and legal system. So some of you will know that I'm, really going through the 5 no-hike laws and leaving the last 2, which are in fact the first 2 last, because they concern religious freedom. So if God in his commandment said no idolatry, he is obviously taking away our religious freedom, which is obviously resented by atheists. And he also says no speech crime, no blasphemy, or any act that might be interpreted as being offensive to God if he exists. But actually, Americans don't have to do this because they've got their First Amendment, and if anybody will even read the Quran, they will find not a single reference to to blasphemy. So actually, if you're going to be literal, and I will be literal about the interpretation of the Quran, because it's only when you interpret it in a literal way that you will get the most freedom and protection. It is, of course, the hadith that is restrictive and introduces capital offences where none exists in the Quran, presumably for the political reasons of the caliphs over the centuries, the caliphs who were absolute monarchs. So there is obviously going to be a great deal of difference between living under an absolute monarchy and living in a constitutional republic, as I'm sure Americans, or at least the early Americans, would tell you. So the only way to protect your rights is to have a constitution. While I understand that just because you have something written down doesn't mean that your rights are secure, it is a start, right? It's a start. You try and remember things, write things down, say that get the other person to agree to it, put their name on it, and hey, you've got a contract, and maybe an enforceable contract that the courts will respect. Because the whole point of the courts enforcing contracts is that our bargains with each other must be respected, because if they didn't, then we would cheat each other left, right, and centre. And I'm certainly saying that marriage should be treated as a contract, so that gender relations may improve, so that the parties to the marriage will behave well towards each other, or face social and economic consequences when they do not. So what I like about the Quran is its legalistic aspects, which I know, would be hated by anyone considering themselves to be liberal, because liberals are the people who think they're too cool for rules and don't need them. Now I will go through the questions, the comments. And thank you for all coming and posting reasonably intelligent comments. I'll deal with Skyworks, who I know is not a supporter. He says, religions are worldviews built on a poor understanding of the cosmos and incorporate superstition and imaginary entities designed to keep the masses stupefied. But are we not stupefied with our atheism and our sex and drugs and rock and roll, and the way the matriarchy keeps saying this kind of sex that used to be illegal, well, it's now legal, go have a good time, oh, this drug and that. They want us to stupefy ourselves, they want to distract us so we don't collectively form the idea that we want government in the national interest, which I propose to, and this is how I want to define nationalism. Nationalism is government in the national interest. And this is what nationalists cannot seem to want to agree with me about. Because, they want nationalism to be about them, to be about white people, to be about Europeans. And I'm saying, no, for perfectly practical reasons, you can't, because, if you say it's for this group rather than, the rich, or, men rather than women, or, the young rather than the old, or vice versa, you're going to alienate the other groups. So what you have to say is that it should be for the national interest, and the national interest is balancing the conflicting interests of all the different competing groups in society, the young and the old, the rich and the poor, the men and the women, and young and old. So, and the majority and the minorities. You want to protect their rights. You want everybody who have these different interests to, live reasonably happily without rebellion, rioting, civil war, and therefore the rules have to be fair enough. So, and that's why nationalism can't be favouring, the indigenous people or, the people who are here first and all that crap. Because unless you're actually useful, you will be lowered in status. And this is really the problem of white people, particularly if they come from the working class. They're now allowed to be welfare mums, right? They're going to be allowed to breed their bastards at the expense of the taxpayer. And even though the political parties are not doing anything about that now, because they already know that they are the majority, right? Single mums get a special status because they're bringing up the next generation, even if badly. And it would be electorally significant if any political party in the West were to propose raising the status of married parents over that of non-parents and treat unmarried parents as sex offenders. Of course, it's going to be controversial, but I'm not going to restrain myself just because it's controversial. These things need to be said. So I know a lot of people. I think they probably agree with me about the basically saying, but by their pretense and not supporting me, pretending not to understand what I'm saying, pretending I'm mad, is that they don't want to be seen to be saying the things that I do because they know what kind of reaction they're going to get from their single mother friends, from their own single mother, or from their the mother of their offspring, or So I think a lot of people are morally compromised in that, and I'm saying, don't worry. My standards are actually reassuringly, conveniently low. I've lived in the West. I know how Westerners think. I understand their culture. So I'm saying nobody who has had illegitimate offspring are going to be punished when secular Koranism becomes law. In fact, I will allow a period of grace for 1 year. So if today secular Koranism became law and today you gave birth to a bastard, you're not going to get punished. You're not going to get punished until the 11th of November 2026. Because then you'll have no excuse. You can't just say, oh, I didn't know you were going to come to power. You will already know that you've been let off, right? You've been let off this punishment for a whole year. And if you choose to have unprotected sex and you get yourself knocked up, you really have no excuse. Come the 11th of November 2026, I'm going to be so fair and not be imposing retrospective legislation on you. So I don't see what the problem is, other than maybe a desire not to admit your mistakes. So I do not see what I have said about marriage and family values that fits the description of Skyworks. Poor understanding of the cosmos? I don't think so. I accept the Big Bang, incorporating superstition and imaginary entities. No, just one, the Abrahamic God who created the universe, or who is believed by Jews and Muslims to have created the universe, well, if there was a creation, there must have been a creator, right? This reminds me of Dub talking about Ishmael and Isaac. And that was when I said, it doesn't matter about Isaac or Ishmael, whether, okay, Muslims say it wasn't Isaac whom Abraham attempted to sacrifice. The story of Abraham and Isaac, and Abraham was being so obedient to God that he was prepared to sacrifice his son if God so required it. And then God said, I was only kidding. I was just testing you. Actually, I want people to understand that I don't want human sacrifice. I hereby ban human sacrifice. So that was a reason for the story of Abraham and Isaac. But Muslims would say, oh no, it wasn't Isaac, it was Ishmael. But it doesn't matter. The principle is clear that God forbade human sacrifice. So why would God sacrifice his own son? Right? So okay, the story of God banning human sacrifice because of the story of Abraham and Isaac was told to me by a rabbi. And this means that God would be contradicting himself if he decides to sacrifice his own son. I don't know how many years later, but he would be contradicting himself, right? Therefore, the Christian story is just completely wrong. And we could argue that it might even be a sign of God's mercy that he has allowed Christianity to exist for so long, even though it's obviously offensive to him if he isn't Jesus and if he never did any of those things that Christians claimed or lied that he did, that God begot a son through the Virgin Mary and decided to sacrifice his only son to save us from his own anger. It's a cock and bull story, right? It's just ridiculous and unbelievable. And the only reason why Christians believe this ridiculous story is because they have been forced to believe it since the 4th century, and they can't bring themselves to admit that they've been lied to since the 4th century and tell this cock and bull story that they feel that they have that they feel they have to pretend to believe in order to be Christian because they don't want to be Muslim, right? They only pretend to be Christian because they don't want to be Muslim because they're Islamophobes. But Islam is really quite easy to believe. So the story for Muslims is this. God caused the Big Bang. He did reveal the Torah, but the transmission of the Torah has been corrupted. As far as Muslims are concerned, they accept the virgin birth and they think Jesus was a good guy. While Jews say he should be boiling in excrement and sperm, I believe, because he caused all those dumb Gentiles to worship him as a co-equal of God. So Muslims believe Jesus was a good guy and his mother was not a slut. And the question arises as to what good did Jesus do? I believe the answer must be that Jesus was sent by God to play a trick on idolaters and blasphemers who will be shown, who will have their lies and hypocrisy and stupidity exposed in the 21st century. If only Jews and Muslims had the courage to jointly declare Christianity to be idolatry and blasphemy, because according to the Christian narrative, Jesus was convicted of blasphemy, as well as sorcery, I think, with all his magic tricks and turning water into wine and walking on water and all kinds of things. That's forbidden too. So he got himself into a lot of trouble. The only way you can say Jesus was not a bad guy could be that it's not true. The charges against him were not true, that he did not ever say that he was a son of God and had to be worshipped. So you could say that, but the Sanhedrin found him guilty anyway, and Christians decided to worship him anyway, even though there was no reason for them to believe it, in this cock and bull story. And we could perhaps excuse them because in the year 380, the Edict of Thessalonica was passed by the Roman Emperor Theodosius, and it said that non-Trinitarian Christians would be persecuted. So this would obviously frighten people into pretending to believe that Jesus is God. And barbarian kings of Europe, after they were converted to Christianity, would be wanting their subjects to follow their religion. And if they chose to contradict the narrative or question the divinity of Jesus, they would be burnt at the stake. And this was how the Europeans ruled for a very long time. No one had any rights. Just understand that under an absolute monarchy, no one has any rights. And that was why the founding fathers decided they'd had enough of this crazy system, and they sort of knew that once they founded their republic, there was actually very little the British could do. And this is basically the history of America. So Cowboy, did you get my explanation of why Jews, according to Voltaire, if you view that video that I posted, that Jews, you would expect Jews to be extinct because they have the most restricted religion, everybody hates them, but why are they still around annoying everyone, right? That's a question you should ask, and the answer must be, well, God must protect them because they're useful to make some kind of point, right? And I'm saying, yes, they are useful, because if you understand the history of Jews, then you can see their purpose in reminding Gentiles, or at least making Gentiles think, why did God create Jews? They're so annoying. They don't even follow their own religion, and why do we hate them, and why do we blame them for bad government? I suppose they are the dog that is kicked when its master has a bad day at work. Maybe. So it's a kind of scapegoat, right? Or maybe we just want to take it out on things that are not directly responsible for our bad day because we can. And a lot of people do abuse their power. And really, they think it's all right. It's my dog. I'll kick it, right? Skyworks says, gods are phantom totems dreamt of and fabricated by misinformed individuals. But how can you undermine the logic of if there was a creation, there must have been a creator? And if you accept the Big Bang Theory, then you would have to accept that the universe was created because there was a time when it was not expanding, when it was just a singularity, and then something happened, and it was called the Big Bang, and the universe began to expand, right? So you may think as a scientist that you know everything, but it's only theists who can tell you with their annoying certainty that it was God who caused the Big Bang. Shall I find you the video, the Luke Ford stream that I appeared on? I could do that to be helpful and give my mind a rest, not answering your questions. But I do appreciate the quality of your questions so early in the day. I can't find it now. I don't know which one it was. Okay, I think it was on 19th October. It's time-stamped. Sorry about the dead air. I just want to do it properly. And, if you're interested enough to ask, when was the last time I appeared on Luke Ford, I should be able to give you the link since you have shown enough of an interest. So I don't appear that regularly. Right, now that I've posted it, I'll go up, scroll up again. Well, Western War Eagle, I guess to be fair to Dub, he was being polite, and I got impatient with him because I predicted where he was going to go. He was going to blame the Jews, and I just didn't want to argue with him anymore. So I told him to get to the fucking point. Right. Asatru was started out here in California, but there's really nothing there. It is basically racialist hippie folk, native Californians who started that movement in Grass Valley, CA. Thank you for that piece of information. Of course, you can't make race your religion, because look at white people in Europe. They were just, white, and then they had their different religions, and then the Romans took them over, and then the Romans Christianized. So, but it didn't work. They still had their terrible wars with each other, and caused each other untold suffering. And even when they stopped believing in God, they still had world wars with each other. So it let's just say that Christianity has not protected white people from each other. So it has had a very long track record of uninterrupted failure. It's just very sad that nobody seems to have noticed, or if they have, they're too afraid to say. Thank you for saying I was being reasonable, until he just sort of went on his convoluted stories of why the Jews are to blame. And I'm just saying, well, use Sharia to protect yourselves from each other, and Jews use Sharia to protect yourselves from those Gentiles who hate you. That's all you have to do, and it will. I was raised Southern Baptist as Western War Eagle, but I can tell that Protestantism is collapsing. My native Alabama is now a matriarchy. I don't know if you listen to E. Michael Jones, who is currently proposing a Catholic-Muslim alliance with my streaming partner, Khalid. He said, I'm not calling it a Christian-Muslim alliance because the Protestants won't be around for much longer. Ha, ha, ha. So that was what he was saying. Why won't they be around? They're not having children. They've lost a Protestant work ethic that was destroyed by the welfare state. So it's all linked, but you have to understand your own history and the mechanics of the welfare state, as well as the mechanics of slavery, which I am saying should not have been abolished. I know that's another controversial thing that I say. We have to reintroduce slavery, but it doesn't have to be. It really doesn't have to be whipping blacks in cotton fields, right? It doesn't have to. You don't have to ill-treat your slaves. And in fact, you're probably not going to do it. They cost money. Say you bought a new washing machine and it sort of doesn't work. Are you going to kick it immediately? No, you're going to go, oh dear, what seems to be the matter with you? I'll call the manufacturers, so that they can deal with its failure. It's got a 1-year guarantee or whatever. So even if you bought something to do stuff for you, even if it's a machine with no feelings, you're not going to kick it, right? You're not going to hurt it because you know that maybe it can be repaired. So I don't think slaves will necessarily be badly treated, particularly if we give them rights, and I'm proposing a kind of government-run agency for the hiring of slaves capable of work. I mean, people might even see it as a kind of career opportunity. So my proposal is to make sure people who are capable of work, to train them up for it. And actually, the plan would be to have success stories of people who participate in the scheme getting to the top. if they apply themselves, they will be given remedial education if they can't read or write. Some slaves might be good for clerical duties, others fit for, other things. It depends on what the slave wants. There'll be, psychometric tests, educational tests. If the slave wants to improve his or her education, they could be trained, and then their ability to absorb new information, to be academically successful, can be assessed. So I don't see why it would have to be a problem at all, and it has to be government run to prevent abuse. And there will be slave visitors to see if the slave is working properly and that damage it isn't being caused to government property, because the property of the slave would reside in the government. The government actually owns the slave and hires it out to people and runs the account of the slave, because obviously the hire of the slave will be paying the slave, and once it reaches a certain amount, where when manumission is reached, then the slave is freed. But the slave might wish to stay on for a bit in order to, have a deposit for the flat or mortgage or whatever it wants. I shouldn't call it it, I suppose, but you know what I mean. I might call a child it, so I don't have to, try and decide whether it's going to be his or her, male or female. So I don't see the problem with that. I know that way back in ancient Greece, Euripides wrote a play called Trojan Women, and the story was about what the women of Troy were saying to each other after Troy had fallen, and the Greeks had penetrated Troy because they were the Trojans were foolish enough to bring the Trojan horse into their city walls. Even though Cassandra, who was a Trojan woman, warned them not to trust Greeks bearing gifts. So we know the story. The Greeks besieged Troy for 10 years. They just couldn't penetrate the city walls, but they decided to leave a Trojan horse behind full of Greek soldiers. And eventually the Trojans thought, yay, the war is over. The Greeks have given us a gift. And they wanted to believe all those things. So they completely ignored Cassandra. And the rest is history. So the Trojans were taken over. The women, the aristocratic women, Queen Hecuba, her daughter-in-law Helen, were all bickering with each other, and actually it was Queen Hecuba who said, oh, this Helen, she caused all that trouble. My son Paris visited Sparta on an ambassadorial visit and fell in love with Helen, who was already married to the king of Sparta, King Menelaus, and then they eloped together, and that was the reason why the Trojan War started, because King Menelaus complained to the other Greek kingdoms of this insult done to his honor, and they decided to besiege Troy and get his wife back. So basically Helen didn't even give a coherent answer. She was given a speech Euripides wrote a speech for her, but it didn't really make sense. It's like, what's a woman to do? She falls in love, and she was saying, I'm not to blame. And Queen Hecuba saying, women like you should be stoned to death. And then she went on about, oh, what will become of me? They'll just turn me into a governess, and I'll have to look after the royal brats of the Greek kings. Woe is me, kind of thing. So they weren't necessarily killed. I mean, the women would be useful as cooks and wives for the conquerors, right? It's only the men who were killed. What's my point? I seem to have forgotten it. Why am I talking about the Trojan women? Oh, I forgot. Sorry about that. Oh, yes, slavery. Slavery is useful for people who want a large sum of money but haven't got it in ready. So you say, well, if I promise to work for you for 5 years, would you give me this large sum of money so I can do stuff with it? And if the answer is yes, you've got your large sum of money, but you'll have to work for the person who gave you a large sum of money for a stated number of years, and then you'll get your freedom. And this was how most Europeans managed to pay their fare, to make their Atlantic crossing. So slavery was what made America great, right? And don't you forget that. So slavery is useful. Slavery was never banned by God in either the Bible or the Quran. And it's like, there's God and he's banned everything. We can't even, bow before idols. We can't even conceive of him as anything material or physical. But he didn't ban slavery. So what does this mean? It means that the British and the Americans had no business at all in banning slavery, and their punishment is clear. In order to replace the benefits of slavery, they had to create the welfare state, and the welfare state is eating them out of house and home, and it's their own fault for their disobedience, right? And they could easily correct themselves by adopting secular Koranism. They could, get the media to interview me about secular Koranism. They could write about it and give people permission to discuss secular Koranism. Because I know a lot of people say, well, I'm not going to discuss your crazy idea, Claire. People will look at me funny, I'll just never get over it, right? So I did say there are people I know, I've known them for years, say, obviously they've heard of secular Koranism, but they're not going to tell anyone about it because they'll know that people will look at them as scars, right? They'll think, well, how come you know about this weird idea? I haven't heard it being mentioned at all, So, but who is to say that there isn't maybe one or two? Is that too much to hope for? Decent, honourable people working in Western media who say, well, we should at least ask this woman a bunch of questions about her secular Koranism and satisfy ourselves that it's, she's not crazy, it's not evil, etc., etc. Of course, they could do that if they had any honor, if they were not completely controlled by the CIA. Somebody would actually engage with me on the subject. Currently, I'm trying to get myself well, I would like to give a talk on this. Yes, I would like to give a talk on secular Koranism in front of live people, people in the room sharing the same air as me. This is the least I can do, even though I don't think these people are, going to do anything that just, low status conspiracy theories. It's like, okay, if all you can do is go on about your low status conspiracy theories, why don't you just listen to me? I have a solution, and if you don't like it, we could. You could ask me tough questions about it. I don't mind. I don't mind a hostile audience. But maybe they're afraid. Maybe they're also afraid to give me a platform in case they get into trouble. So the fear is real. But maybe I don't need to talk to a bunch of losers and low status conspiracy theorists who, obviously just want to moan about Muslims and blame the Jews. Who cares what they think, right? But I will continue to attempt to get myself invited to give a talk on secular Koranism and answer questions from actual people who have understood what I'm saying. Right. I've been talking for 90 minutes now. Well, thank you, Western War Eagle, for coming. I mean, I want Americans to understand that actually I don't really bother with British people. They're just, a vassal state of America. I'm sort of thinking of these people now because, I think, well, I should reach out to them occasionally, and maybe they'll say yes. Maybe they'll say, right, it could be entertaining. We'll give you a chance. We don't much care for it, but we'll still let you speak because, we believe in free speech. It's that sort of thing. So I guess I should, give them the opportunity to change their minds, right? But really, it's the Americans who are the most important people because America is a global hegemon. And look, I'm afraid people are going to blame you guys, right? If America starts World War III, the reputation of Americans and white people and Christians will be mud. So I think you owe it to yourselves and your founding fathers, if you care anything for them. I think it was a tremendous achievement for them to tell King George III to go jump in a lake, and you should continue developing the idea because, obviously, let me try and remember the quote from John Adams, who said, the Constitution is only fit for, the Constitution cannot operate in the absence of a moral people. So John Adams will say, it doesn't matter if you have the perfect set of rules. It's not going to work if you won't follow it. And while I know that there will be, a lot of people seeking power who will pretend to be honorable and honest, and but they will, when they get into power, not do what they promised to do. So how can you get round the problem of corrupt and incompetent politicians getting to be members of your ruling class, who seem to be chosen merely because they are corrupt and incompetent? And I'm saying you really need a religion to solve this problem, right? And there are still remnants of this idea of Americans believing in God, because on your dollar bills it says, trust in God. And in the Declaration of Independence, there is a reference of man being created equal So there is an acknowledgement of a creator, and the creator must be the Abrahamic God, the all-powerful Abrahamic God. I know the early Americans had an argument about whether God interests himself in human affairs. But of course, you must believe that, because if you don't believe that, then there's no point saying you believe in God, because it won't help you act correctly if you say that that God doesn't exist to punish evil and reward good. It's only if you believe that God exists to punish evil and reward good in this life and the next that you would think it's logical and rewarding to act correctly. So that's why you have to believe that God is perfectly moral and omnipotent, and he's just letting this experiment to see who gets the message soonest out of all of humanity that he created. That's the experiment, right? So he can give Jews the Torah, and then you see that they don't follow it, and they're making nice with the idolaters, who are really the worst ones, because it's not that Christians are just innocent idolaters. They're using Jesus to actually insult God and to contradict God and to make the people more malleable, I suppose, because the uneducated would always want some divinity to be human. So that's why they think of God as, an old man with a long white beard, and Christians want to think of God as Jesus. The Greeks would have a whole pantheon of gods who look like, well, who are human, who have human features. And even now people want to insist that they prefer their God to be human, and sadly for the Jews and Muslims, they don't actually have the courage to tell Christians, like, look, it's idolatry. If you're going to think of God as in any way human, I'm sorry, but that's idolatry, and you're going to go to hell if God exists. Oh, you don't care. It means that you're an atheist. And what's an atheist doing pretending to believe in God? It must mean you're a hypocrite. According to the Quran, hypocrites go to hell, and so there's no need for righteous people to take the opinions of hypocrites seriously. In fact, they should make a point of dismissing people who claim to be Christian, because their minds are a mess and they can't prove the Trinity. So if it's basically an open goal that Jews and Muslims are still too afraid to kick. It's a ball that they could easily kick into the goal, but they don't, because, well, I guess they've never done it before. They don't want to leave the person to do it. They're still afraid of their Christian overlords, and they leave it to me, and then they pretend not to understand what I'm saying. But maybe Christians will correct themselves. With their First Amendment and everything, surely there will be some Americans who say, maybe Claire's got a point, right? Maybe being educated and intelligent men, the founding fathers resented pretending to believe in nonsense. They really, really did, to the extent that they fought the Revolutionary Wars to reject the rule of George III, who was, well, he had mental health issues, didn't he? And understandably educated, intelligent men who lived. Well, I guess they didn't live through the wars of the Reformation, but they knew what havoc it caused in Europe. They didn't want any more of that. They probably, being intelligent and educated men, thought Christianity was a heap of hooey and didn't want any American in their newly founded republic being forced to believe in that nonsense. But in that time, it was difficult to, well, okay, even though the early Americans did discuss religion, it would still be a bit awkward if you found that if you were accused of being an atheist or a Muslim or a Jew, you had to be vaguely Christian and say, oh, but I don't quite agree with the Trinity. I don't see why we have to be burned at the stake for denying the Trinity. It's that kind of thing. And it's annoying when you lose your train of thought. Okay, back to the early Americans. Yes, what I was going on to say was about deism and theism. So amongst the people who still claim to believe in God, there would be those who said, well, there's the God of nature, and I don't, like what Spinoza said, maybe he doesn't exist to punish evil or reward good, but he still created the universe. He doesn't really take an interest in our affairs, so we should try and manage our affairs as best we can. But I'm saying Thomas Jefferson, who owned a copy of the Quran, must have read it. And he did draft the Virginia Statute of Religious Freedom, and that later became the First Amendment, supported by Chapter 2, verse 256 of the Quran, that says there is no compulsion in belief, truth stands clear from error. And I'm saying you won't find any holy book of any other religion that supports the First Amendment apart from the Quran. So even if you don't like it, the fact remains that the Quran is actually quite a liberal little book. Skyhook says, if you trace ideas and beliefs back, they were built on inklings and developed into frameworks that worldviews were hung on and became creation stories. Well, okay, this is just simple reasoning. If there was a creation, there must have been a creator. There you go. How are you going to deny that? Are you going to deny the Big Bang now? Skyworks. He continues, the idea of spirits, demons, and gods grew out of this misinformed thinking and evolved into monotheism. So he might be referring to this idea that, it's kind of like shopping, right? So once upon a time, there'd be all these shops, selling various things, the fishmonger, the ironmonger, the butchers, and then somebody thought, oh, the supermarket, right? And monotheism has this kind of reasoning attached to it. And instead of going to this temple and that god and different ones, just pray to the Almighty, right? Rune says the West is doomed. Islam is a solution. It is as simple as that. Well, if the West adopts Islam or Sharia, then it won't be doomed, will it? it would actually retain its political influence by Westerners saying we were clearly capable of correcting ourselves, and we admitted it. We done wrong, and we decided to have a religion after all. We Americans, the citizens of the global hegemon America, we corrected ourselves, and we started talking about what John Adams said, that let me just correctly quote his words. The Constitution cannot operate in the absence of a moral people, but I just want to be sure that I've got it completely right. Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. Right, and this means we have a rule system. You need people at the top who will follow those rules. And if you don't, obviously it's not going to be followed, right? If everybody cheats, if everybody lies. So how are you going to ensure that people are not cheating and lying? You need, as well as insisting that people have a strict regard for the truth, and in order to filter out liars, you have to make sure that they're also reasonable people who will be moved by reasonable arguments, and therefore such people need to be able to understand the difference between a valid and a sound argument. So you need. Okay, so that's the first condition, that the person is honest, they're capable of understanding the difference between a valid and a sound argument, and finally, and these are just the minimum arguments for both atheists and theists. And the third one is that they have moral principles. And I'm proposing, the 5 no-hide laws, right? So the 7 is, you follow all 7 if you want to get to heaven. If you don't, including the ones forbidding idolatry and blasphemy. But if you don't believe God exists, you just want, just 5 of them. And I'm saying Sharia is closest to the 7 no-hide laws, and for obvious reasons that should be chosen as a basis of the laws of your country. So why do you think Islam is insane? Skyworks. But he's an Islamophobe and an atheist, so of course he's just going to give his stupid, crappy reasons without offering anything better himself. So Skyworks thinks scripture was written by poor thinkers. Well, can you think of a better thinker than the Abrahamic God? What kind of dictatorship am I in favor of? A constitutional dictatorship. So particular kinds of psychosis are beneficial for cohesion. Is that my claim? No, I don't think psychosis would be good for anything, since it is a kind of mental illness. Two up, two down is saying the 10 Commandments is all we need. I'm saying you need really more than that. in your legislation, you need a highway code that's more than 10, right? We're capable of more. The no height laws are really a kind of rule of thumb for you to measure the righteousness of Gentile religions. And I'm saying, obviously Islam is closest to Judaism because Islam is supposed to worship the same God as the Jews, and that explains why the Quran repeats a lot of the stories found in the Old Testament. Skybook says he is English and belongs to nobody. I would say that we are really the slaves of our government who could, in theory, imprison us, confiscate our property, take away our rights. So it's only a polite fiction that we have rights. And therefore, we have to have rulers that we trust to at least desire to govern in the national interest. So I just don't know why Skywords has such a problem with what I'm saying. Was I projecting my beliefs onto anyone? I'm just telling you about what I think is probably the case. No, well, what Western War Eagle is saying, he's bored with me monologuing, but I need to get things off my chest. I haven't put a link in the stream. I know I've been talking for nearly 2 hours, so were you saying you wanted to join me for a bit? If you say yes, I guess I'll let you on. Skywork says, okay, I'll let you on because Skywork says, you're assuming a creation rather than an evolution, a progressive unfolding and development, a formation of stars, elemental environments, life, minds, and abstractions like ideas, beliefs, and theories. Well, the Big Bang was a creation, wasn't it? Silly man. Western War Eagle says, many Persians would argue that Islam was foisted onto them per the Arab invasion and that Islam is as false as Christianity. Yeah, okay, I'm just saying, the logic of what I've presented to you, if there was a creation, there must have been a creator, and if that creator was the Abrahamic God, neither Persians nor Skyworks will successfully keep God out of their country, right? And if they were being sensible, they would use the laws of the most powerful God conceivable to run their country. Particularly as he's protected the Jews so well. Titans, TB, and Kolam. Okay, check it out. I haven't heard of it. Yes, Iran is dealing with a crisis of pornography and feminism. So I'm afraid the mind virus has spread everywhere, even to countries that call themselves Muslim because of the internet. So we need a global correction, and it should come from America, and I think Americans should want the correction to come from America, so they can get the credit of saying, we realized our error and we corrected ourselves. Not like those Muslims who had all those rules but couldn't follow them properly because they're stupid, right? And all they can do is breed. But you need to do more than just win the numbers game. So Western War Eagle says cultural Marxism has made a dent into Iran for sure. Well, feminism has its own attractions because you have the women saying, why can't we do all these things that we see men doing, and if we can keep men interested in us by offering them extramarital sex, we can corrupt their morals. And once their morals are corrupted, they just won't be able to do anything at all to correct, to deal with their internal or external enemies. And that's what has happened. So Western War Eagle says he's not considering Islam, but he's definitely a friend to Muslims. I typically have more in common with their sentimentality than Protestant Christians for sure. The UK is a shit show thanks to Protestantism. Yeah, I mean, Christianity is if you think it's some kind of spiritual food, it's poisonous, it's toxic. And oh God, I was going to talk at length about a book that I've just read, but I know I've been talking for over 2 hours, so I'll have to leave that one for another time. Gosh, I seem to have rather an awful lot to say for myself lately. I was going to talk about the novels of Barbara Pym, who is very English, a kind of Jane Austen of the 1950s, but I won't do it now because I know you're tired of me droning on. Hello.
Hey, Claire.
Hi, War Eagle. Good to speak to you. Thank you for your comment.
I'm hearing the echo. How do I stop that, Claire? I'm new to this.
You need to close your window, the one you're viewing the video on, or mute it.
Got it. I think that works now. That should, if you can hear me okay.
Yeah. You probably heard your own echo, and I know how distracting it is.
Oh, I just wanted to say hello. We spoke years ago, Claire. I think at least just maybe we were typing back and forth regarding Jay Dyer. It was, I believe you had, your first interview with Dr. E. Michael Jones was in 2017. Is that right?
That's right, yes.
Okay. That's when I found him 2 years prior, before he blew up. And it was a video that's now been deleted, and he was talking about the weaponization of feminism, homosexuality, all these. It just all of a sudden,
You should be able to find it on Odyssey, actually. I know because my YouTube channel is deleted, but it is on Odyssey if you ever want to hear it again.
Oh no, this one was with another. This was with a gentleman in 2015 when I first found EMJ. Before I found you, and before you talked to him, and he was, I forget the YouTube creator's name, but I think he's long since gone from YouTube. But basically, it was what red pilled me, so to speak. At least if you want to get on the Jewish question, I know that's something from the religious standpoint, where EMJ he comes at it from that standpoint. So, because I was kind of on a quest or questioning faith at the time, or getting involved in Facebook groups. This was like 2013 and 14. I was living in Los Angeles and coming from a much more liberal and atheistic standpoint, I wasn't particularly adversarial towards the church or Islam for that matter.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of what EMJ put forward kind of blew my mind at the time. And excuse me, interestingly enough, in Southern California, that it seemed to be kind of the genesis of the alt-right, if you will, at the time. I mean, Trump began to rise. There were so many things that happened in, it seemed like in the summer of 2015. You had the Obergefell decision, gay marriage decision in June of that year. And at that point, gay kind of became passé, and they moved on to kind of the transsexual and all the different, supposedly different genders. And I was living in Los Angeles and I was thinking, I've never even seen this here. Like, what is going on? And then you saw the great migration into Europe that summer, at least as it was depicted in 2015. Trump declared. There was a sequence of events that I began to see things shifting even in the city in which I lived, where I questioned old or beliefs that I had come from like, say, my graduate studies in Los Angeles, and then beliefs I'd once held when I lived down south in Alabama. But the early days alt-right, they were certainly not religious. It was very, well, that's why I brought up that Asatru to you earlier. You had the Nathan D'Amico and what was it, the Identity Europa and all these movements that seem to find their start, oddly enough, in Southern California. California is an interesting state in that way. There's a lot of turbulence and trend setting.
Mm-hmm.
But
it's a wild west of ideas.
No, it is. It is. But the journey's been interesting. I've had really positive interactions with folks of different faiths, including Jewish folk along my journey, even post finding E. Michael Jones, and Jewish folk that have been very positive figures in my life, and with whom I was open about wow, what's going on with this or this Catholic Jewish battle, if you will. And then I found Luke, who was very nice, and I think Luke is still in Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I haven't talked to him in a number of years. I'd like to reach out. But so I kind of went on a quest. I talked to Dr. Jones twice on Skype, again before he got so famous. I think around the time that you guys spoke, this was summer of 2017, and then again that fall. But I've continued to follow him and listen, and see how he's blown up. And so I saw that you guys and also your stream partner had a conversation with him. And so the conversations between the Catholics and the Muslims is very interesting. It is an interesting development for me. I like it. I mean, I like the conversation. So.
And you're Southern Baptist, you were saying.
I was raised as such. I'm not religious at this point. I'm a bit on a quest. I say that because I lost my mom 2 years ago, and then and so you question, all right, where is mother was Christian, dad was largely atheistic, and he's struggling, I think, with the God question, so to speak. And then I lost my best friend earlier this year, and it's just and
I'm sorry to hear that.
Oh, well, I mean, everybody, listen, it's much of the turbulence for me with family and with illness or death was during COVID, when everyone was going through a lot here or everywhere, but especially in the States and in California. But I think it's no, you're fascinating to me, the Secular Koranism. I haven't actually seen your streams in a while, but I liked how you challenged EMJ even back in the day, and it was they were very interesting conversations, and I like that your stream partner is speaking with him, as I said, and I'm just observing this phenomenon of the rise of Nick Fuentes, and I can't discern if it's okay. Is this authentic? Is this? I know Dr. Jones has his issues with Fuentes' messaging.
Yes. Which Nick Fuentes will I be talking to if I ever talk to him?
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, it's there's as I mentioned earlier in the comments, there's my barber here. He's a Turkish Muslim. He married a Latina, and she converted to Islam, and he has a daughter. And we have interesting conversations because when I even just brought up Sunni and Shia and just the conflict, he became very interested because I live in a very liberal area. It's white, and then the Latino population here is largely Catholic. It's Mexican Catholic. And I get along well with them. I've learned a lot about Catholicism vis-a-vis Dr. Jones. I know less about Islam, but as I mentioned earlier, I don't disagree with much of what you say in that Islam in England or in the UK right now seems to be the driving force of morality. I guess I'm mimicking Dr. Jones here when I talk about Protestantism dissolving, but I go down south where I'm from, Claire, and you just see it firsthand, the problems that, who am I to judge? I'm not a theologian, but you see the upside down world of the women leading the men, the submissiveness of the guys down there. It's a very conquered place. I mean, the South has a very they're kind of a conquered people and have been.
Well, because the black, right? I mean, sorry, it's one of the southern states where there's a high black population. Isn't that the case, or with Alabama?
Yeah, absolutely, yes. And you have much of what Dr. Jones says to that end about the civil rights movement and the kind of mopping up job that was done in the last, what was it, 2015? Another thing, harkening back to 2015, that's when I saw a lot of the anti-white or the Confederate flag being banned. The Dylan Roof shooting occurred that summer. That was another event that occurred, and so you had the kid go into the church and shoot the black folk, and he had Confederate flags in his hands in a picture, and so they Walmart and Amazon and all of the big retailers, there was the assault on the rebel flag, and it was just a lot of strangeness that, again, I was a bit asleep at the wheel prior to that time. Things just seemed to explode about 10 years ago, and it's accelerating. Things are collapsing. So, insofar as my own religious beliefs at this point, I'm open. I'm not adversarial to God. Are you yourself sincerely Muslim, then, Claire, or you
Well,
are?
no, I'm agnostic, so I'm trying to take the middle ground because I think it's important to and also I was told many years ago by a man I respected very much that agnosticism is the most morally and intellectually respectable position, because it is true that no one alive knows for sure whether God exists or not. But even if they don't know, and even if God doesn't exist, the idea of believing in him is obviously very convenient to the government and people who want to follow certain rules, because the idea of an omnipotent God who can do anything, who is supposed to be able to reward good and punish evil in this life or the next, and knows our hearts and minds, is a very powerful idea, and people kind of want to believe in him when they're feeling frightened and insecure, and that's when there's this English expression: there are no atheists in foxholes, and
Right.
well, even atheists use God a lot. when they exclaim, "Oh my God," and all kinds of things. So I think it's hard for people to actually not use God, because there's this idea, right, that even if you can't get justice in this life, you still kind of hope you get it in the next life. And even if you can't get the court decision that you want in your Supreme Court of your country, you think hypothetically there is this perfectly working judge or court who will give you the justice that you failed to get, even in your Supreme Court.
Right.
Does that make a little bit of sense? That we are, even as we talk about the in the best of all possible worlds, in a perfect world, such and such a thing would happen.
Yeah.
Our government would care about us, and the elites would deserve to be called the elite because they really are the best. That kind of idea.
And what do you guys think about the Catholic movement, that is the legitimacy of it, or the size of it here in the United States, with whether it be the Generation Z, or also because of the Mexican population? Because see, I mean, that's I'm around a lot of them here in the West. So you have a large Latino, which was largely Mexican population. Big families, very different people, but I can communicate with them amicably because of my friendliness towards the Catholic Church, even though I'm not Catholic. I feel like it has a better patrimony than does the thousands of different Protestant churches. I'm pretty hard on the faith in which I grew up now, because it just is. Like I said, I agree with EMJ. I think it's collapsing. I don't see how you bring back the Protestant church.
Well, I think Catholics have the advantage now simply because the Pope is now American, right? And the Catholic Church is the oldest Christian church. Once upon a time, all Christians were Catholics. And then, it split up because for geopolitical reasons, etc. And being the oldest and the most long-standing church, Catholics would have the advantage of that, right? Just because it goes back to Roman times, and really the Pope was just a name. Okay, before Rome Christianized, the chief priest of the Roman Empire was called Pontifex, and after Rome Christianized, he was called Pontifex Maximus, and when Rome Christianized, it became Pontifex without the Maximus. But you can see the resemblance in the titles, right? So I guess the Pope, is a kind of remnant of the Roman Empire, still with us today. And I think the founding fathers understood that, because a lot of the public buildings of America, and even the names of cities are kind of Roman and Greek and classical.
Right.
So I guess that they probably thought, well, the Roman Empire declined and fell, but it ain't going to happen to us. We're going to, avoid all their mistakes, kind of thing. Or there was that hope anyway.
Yeah, and I can't quite tell how legitimate this movement with Fuentes and these younger guys truly is. I mean, if I were to go down south, I think a lot of the younger guys I have encountered, the Generation Z, are either hyper traditionalist, if you will. I guess they would largely be some sort of non-denominational Christian, or they're furries. They're kind of just they are extremists to one end or the other. But
yeah, I don't think it's going to raise your status by calling yourself a groiper, right?
right.
I think EMJ would give you more, intellectual cachet, right? Because he's actually a philosopher and a professor, and he does know history and American literature and that kind of thing.
Yeah,
Even though
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, and they being down south are very adversarial, still in large measure to the Catholic Church. Um, it's funny growing up. My father always was, and he was atheistic. And he was very philo-Semitic. So, um, yeah,
Hmm.
it's
Yeah, I remember Luke saying Christianity for Americans is just a cultural affiliation. They don't take the rules seriously, but it's sort of like, it's a church of mum and dad and grandpa and grandma, and that's why, I'm in this church rather than the other church. And I think that this is true of anyone with any religion, because no Hindu or Muslim or Jew is going to say, "Oh, I'm going to convert to another religion because I think it's more likely to be true." Because there'll be social issues about suddenly leaving the religion of your community, your family, and also maybe your parents might be upset with you enough to disinherit you or something of that nature, you know? So there will always be a kind of reluctance to reject the religion of mum and dad. And I don't think people really understand. And also, I've been trying to explain to people, look, you may think you don't have a religion, but there is an orthodoxy, and it is called the liberal order. It's called liberal orthodoxy, and this includes a whole bunch of stuff like freedom of speech, freedom of expression, the First Amendment, calling yourself the Free West, and being sexually liberated, and gay marriage and transgenderism and feminism, which is all to do with how sexuality is not controlled and not funneled into being responsible married parents. And that's why the West is falling behind. If you're not producing, you know, um, productive citizens of the future, then you'll need to import your labor. If you don't care about your own working classes, if you don't look after them by giving them jobs and retaining your manufacturing base, then they're just going to become degenerates and useless, and then you'll have to replace them with foreign workers, and then they'll complain, and everybody will complain, and then I guess your political system will crash and burn.
right. Yeah.
And,
The
and,
yeah,
and I'm just trying to say that Sharia has all those elements of regulating gender relations, labor relations, and international relations. And I know people hate it, but oh, it's so legalistic and all these neat categories. And I'm just saying, well, that's what I like about it. It's all kind of predictable and logical and easy to accept, and wins all the arguments against the people who hate it. Yes, people say, "Oh, you just won the argument. I still hate it."
yeah, it feels like that's more of a presence in Europe and where you are in the United Kingdom. That I don't. The fellow I spoke of earlier, who's here in California, that's the Muslim. I mean, I don't know much about the Muslim population in certain. The U.S. is so big. That's the issue here. Is I remember saying to Dr. Jones 8 years ago. I was say I used to follow Vox Day. He still has his. I think he has his own unauthorized .tv that he does. But he always had the theory that the U.S. is going to break apart, or that perhaps it's fragmenting now. And Dr. Jones, at least when I spoke to him, disagreed on that. But it does seem that it could. This is such a big country here that, and California is so different. I mean, there are already movements afoot for secession and splintering from the federal government. So I think some of it depends on that as far as in America. But as you said earlier, so much of the hegemony of the world, I mean, we America determines it. So currently the American empire, and I'm no fan of the empire. So, but the religious question, but what you're describing culturally, no, I understand. I mean, it's the issues with women, with the sexual passions, all the things Dr. Jones speaks of, and things that I speak with my Muslim friend about. You know, and there's a lot of solutions there, and
Yeah, and the women will fall into line. They really will, once you guys get it together to change the rules. If you change the rules, the women will fall into line. But you can't expect the women to agree with you now, because they're not going to stick their necks out and be far right or far left, because their boyfriend or husband says it, because, they're going to stay with the mainstream because it doesn't reward these women, to be far left or far right. They're going to go with the status quo, until the dissidents get it together to mount a successful revolution. And that is really what I think men should be focusing on, instead of seeking the approval of women. They'll never get it. Women will not approve of low status men seeking to overthrow the current order. They have to become part of it, and then the women will respect the men.
no, absolutely.
So blaming Jews will lower your status, because we already know it's not socially acceptable to be racist and, hate on Muslims and hate on Jews and hate on non-whites. The women will know to avoid people like that. So that's kind of really the problem for you guys, right? But then you might think of it in terms of, well, do we even deserve to sire legitimate children if we can't get it together to change the rules?
Well, it's that you show up to the future if you have children, otherwise you don't. So no children, no future. So absolutely. Um, Yeah, and I'm not. I've always thought that the Jew obsession was. I mean, I've come to realize I think it's a bit ridiculous. I will say that so you have those that promote the white American identity. The problem is the ethnicity. There's so many different European ethnicities here too. I mean, the founding stock was largely English. It was the English common law. It's fundamentally like that was the posterity. But it depends on how autistic you want to go. If you want to describe what was what is an American at this point, and but yeah, Jews but the thing is with Dr. Jones's approach is or if you talk about Catholicism, I guess you do have to deal with that battle, do you not? I mean, that's what I used to talk to my Jewish friend as a physician about the eternal dilemma there, or battle between the two groups of Hebrews, as EMJ would say, and
sorry, what two groups of Hebrews?
from the inception of the faith of Christianity, I'm saying, if you look at it from that Catholic patrimony, that it's a religious battle. It's not about biological determinism. But that the fact remains that that Christianity began as a battle between two groups of Hebrews.
Yes, the ones who thought Jesus was a Messiah and those who didn't.
Right.
Yes, and those who thought he committed a crime and those he hadn't. But the point is now. Christianity is a Gentile religion, and you could say that Paul, on his way to Damascus, found inspiration in the idea. It's like, well, we're never going to persuade the Jews who know they're not supposed to practice idolatry to worship a man, and it's very hard to say that the Messiah has come when the world carries on for 2,000 years. So. I mean, you've kind of lost the argument, right? So, and of course, Deuteronomy 13 said, does tell Jews, like, if anybody comes to tell you to follow a different set of rules, kill him. So as far as the Jews are concerned, in the Sanhedrin, they were just following orders. It's like, here's Jesus saying he's a son of God, telling us to change our ways. Well, we have to kill him. And, with his magic tricks and his sorcery and claiming that God is his papa, he's obviously guilty of, trying to persuade us to practice idolatry and blaspheming against God. So I guess maybe they had a point, but now we've got so much history to look back on, and maybe we just have the leisure to understand that idolatry. What is idolatry? What does it even mean? And why won't Christians discuss it? Because obviously, as far as Jews and Muslims are concerned, it's idolatry to worship a man.
Right. It's interesting. I had two Jewish friends. Well, one being Luke, with whom I spoke years ago, and then also a Jewish physician friend of mine in Los Angeles. Both encouraged me to go back to church. So, and that not to seek particularly Jesus, but the physician in particular was about coming back to God. He was quite conservative. He was a big, he loved Trump. I remember this was years back, and big Israel when his daughter was in school in Israel. But very comfortable with these conversations. But he understood that I had, picked up things that I had explored different scenes, and saw that racialist movement, as it were, probably about 10 years ago. But that seems to kind of have that is erupting a lot online, though. All of this, the racial, the stuff that Jones talks about trying to solve the racial difficulties with bringing in the religious element, suggesting that we're the triple melting pot, which could now be called quadruple if you bring in Islam, but between Jews, Protestants, and Catholics in the United States, I mean, like Yugoslavia, he would say. Yeah.
But okay, I suppose I get terribly frustrated with Americans. It's like the separation of the church and state. It doesn't just apply to Christianity, because if you're a Jew and you question some law of the land, saying, well, according to the Torah, sodomites are supposed to be stoned. So how about it? And of course, Congress will say this separation of church and state. We're not going to be ruled by, anyone's religious book, right? I mean, that is the current position. So a Muslim saying, oh, hey, you're allowing casinos in Las Vegas. This isn't allowed according to our book of rules. And they'll be told to go jump in the lake too. And I want to mention to you Arthur Goldberg, because he's this Jew who basically he got into trouble with his conversion therapy clinic. So he had an only son. The son became gay, and obviously it's very upsetting if your only son is gay. So he established a whole bunch of conversion therapy clinics, because he was saying, well, Jews can't go to the conversion therapy clinics of Christians, so we've got to set up our own. And it was called Jonah, but basically he was sued and had to pay lots of money in damages for I can't even remember, but anyway, his thing was called Jonah, which is short for Jews offering new alternatives for healing, because it's like, I guess Jews will think, well, we're so few in number, and obviously, our children marinating in this culture, they'll become gay, and we'll have no grandchildren, and that would be terrible, and Jews might die out and stuff. So anyway, they convicted him of fraud, and he wanted to appeal to the federal court, and he wasn't allowed to, and he wasn't given a proper reason. It was some kind of one sentence explanation, which was clearly not an explanation. So I'm saying Jews don't get their way either, and I guess I'm trying to say that going to a different church won't change anything. You really have to say we want the law changed, and it's these laws, and it should be the other way because reasons. I just don't see how going to a different church on a Sunday is in any way going to help you. And also, I think the American Pope was a CIA appointment, so I'm sure the CIA have some plans to weaponize Christianity against Muslims or anyone who's socially conservative. In the UK, there's been this ARC conference, and it's called, which is short for Alliance for Responsible Citizens, and it's basically reaching out to the white metropolitan elite who, still think of themselves as middle class and vaguely Christian, because Jordan Peterson he was speaking at it, and it was really, I think, showing hatred towards Trump and hatred towards Muslims. That was kind of their shtick, really. And I don't quite know what they're going to do yet. But okay, Christianity is very easy to kind of manipulate because it hasn't really got many rules, right? And it's the same with liberalism and conservatism, because they haven't got any, principles like the Ten Commandments or the Five Pillars of Islam. So I think in 2014, David Cameron, who was Conservative Prime Minister, legalized gay marriage, and he said, well, marriage is a conservative thing, and we're going to give it to gay people to make them more conservative, or some crazy reason like that. And he managed to push it through, because I guess people weren't that bothered about gay people or marriage. And that's why you keep, the boundaries of sexual liberation are always being pushed towards more, ever more sexual liberation, which will, of course, delay marriage and cause any, marriages to be less stable, because people will think it's cool to cheat and it's their right.
Yeah, sure. Well, Claire, I tell you, it's 4 a.m. here. I really wanted to get on just to say hello to you. I enjoyed finding your stream tonight.
Thank you for coming. I hope I managed to say something new to you, because I'm also conscious that maybe you've heard it all before.
No, that's all right. I would be more interesting if it weren't so late or early here, I should say. But it's a pleasure, and I'd love. So you work with, is it Khalid? Is that your stream partner that interviewed Dr. Jones?
Yes. Well. So I'm trying to encourage him to. Well, I mean, I hope that Khalid will ask the questions that I would ask. Ask Mike if he was still talking to me. I don't know if he's kind of not talking to me anymore, because I know, what's her name, Dr. Amy Smith, doesn't like me and doesn't like my questions, because I keep saying, are you hoping to turn the American Republic into a Catholic monarchy and getting E. Michael Jones to become Pope? Is that what you Catholics are really hoping for? Well, it ain't going to happen. It's like, what can you do as Catholics anyway in America with the separation of church and state? I mean, it didn't work for Charlie Kirk, did it? Because I know, okay, Charlie Kirk was kind of Protestantism, and it's like, oh yeah, and then he represented Christian nationalism, and then his wife forgave his killer 11 days after his death. It must have been very demoralizing for Christian husbands of America, right?
Oh, that was embarrassing. That was a charade. I saw, what was it, the award they gave Erica Kirk, what was a day or two ago? It's just pathetic. It's just it was a Fox News, it was a Fox Network presentation or something. I don't know if you know what I'm talking. I can't recall exactly what this was. It was a couple of days ago. It was some sort of award for her. But yeah,
I'll look that up. But yeah, it's terrible. It must have been so dismaying. But maybe it was all planned. It's like, yeah, we're going to give this golden boy, the poster boy of Christian nationalism. We'll give him a bit of success and publicity, and then we're going to shoot him. We're going to knock him down, and then before his body is even cold, his wife is going to forgive his killer. So don't you try anything Christian nationalist of America. Don't you even think about it. I mean, do you think that that's a kind of psyop that was being tried on you guys?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I really, and I sound like a papist here, and I'm not a Catholic, but I do know some folk. Orthodoxy is a whole other discussion, Eastern Orthodoxy, but California has a bit of both movements. You do still see some of the big mega Protestant churches of the Charlie Kirk ilk, but there are a lot of Catholics and a lot of Orthodox. There's a Father Trenham, St. Andrews. He's fairly famous on YouTube. The guy with the beard, younger priest out of California here in Riverside. So there's a big Orthodox movement as well amongst white folk, if you will, but people of different ethnicities. But no, to your point, it just that kind of Protestant megachurch, hands raised, the rock band, the fireworks going off. I mean, that's what I see when I go down south, and I can't. It never spoke to me. It wasn't always as it is now. It just continues to devolve into just a clown show. I mentioned that earlier in your chat. And largely led by women. It's very emotional. You guys are very henpecked. It's just, it's embarrassing. Like, I can't. I look forward soon to going down to visit family for Christmas. I'm thinking, my God, what church are we going to go to? This is just, it's like, man, it continues. It gets worse with each passing year. So, yeah, I think the country is fragmenting and religiously, but I don't disagree with you. I think you have to have that basis. I mean, that I don't want to say theocratic basis, but like Jones was right that America's problem from its inception was this whole separation of church and state. And just saying the founding fathers just throwing up their hands because these people are all crazy. The founding fathers were not themselves religious, as far as I know. Most were deists. So yeah, it's been a problem from the inception. There's never been real unity in the United States.
I think it's because the founding fathers didn't quite dare in that time to say, shall we use Sharia as our rule of law. I don't think they quite dared, but I think 21st century Americans wouldn't have those inhibitions if you can explain to people. It's like it doesn't even matter whether it's Sharia or not. You just have the governed and the government need to agree on what those rules are so that, people can police each other's morals. It's sort of like, if you're expected to play Monopoly or whatever game it is you're forced to play, you demand to know what the rules are, because if you don't know what the rules are, you're going to lose. Right, so it's a kind of like the name of, the game of life. We never asked to be born. We were born, and we have to make the best of our lives. And we need to know what the object of the game is, the name of the game, and the rules of the game. And we will never find out if the government keeps changing the rules, which they have done, over the centuries, but even more in our lifetimes. They keep changing the rules to cover their mistakes, in my view.
Absolutely, and it gets worse with each passing year. It's falling apart. So, Islam, I see the order with it.
I hope you will read the Quran, but I mean, if you can't, I mean, my book is much shorter, and it explains. It's just a mechanical problem. That's what I'm trying to say. You know, whatever group you are, even if you're gangsters or pirates or whatever, you'd say, well, we are pirates and we will loot ships, and after break, or we are we run a protection racket, and our modus operandi is to go around all the restaurants and to buy, and then how we share, our ill-gotten gains. That even criminals have to have a raison d'etre, a reason for existing, and how to regulate the behavior of these members. That's all I'm saying, right? But I'm saying, if you want to be moral and you want to have the approval of God and you want to kind of worship the same God that the Jews and Christians worship, there you go. You've got Islam. And who is to say that Islam is not actually a more advanced model of what came before? Because if you think about it, the Torah was only for Jews. The New Testament, it's just a bunch of guys, Mark, Matthew. What were they saying anyway? They weren't even saying that Jesus was God. They didn't say anything of the sort. But if you go back to the book of Jeremiah, I think it was chapter 31, it talks about the new covenant, and it says the new covenant will come. And of course, the Christians are saying the new covenant is Jesus, but when you think about it, it's like, covenant, what does it mean? It means an agreement, a government, a bargain, some legal thing that, the two parties agreed to follow. And it's like, well, the Quran is a new covenant, surely more than Jesus could be, because, Jesus is deceased, he can't tell us anything, but we've got a book that says, well, if you follow these rules, you'll be okay.
Inshallah.
Hopefully. I hope my arguments are logical.
No, it's good. I mean, it's lovely to speak to you. I tell you, I hope to speak with you again in the future, and I'll subscribe. I'm subscribed to your channel, so I'll be in touch. I'll pay attention. I appreciate you talking to me.
Thank you. And are you on X?
Am I on X? I'm not on any social media at the moment, Claire. I exited out of kind of insanity reasons, or no?
Yes.
Politics and family. Yeah. But I if you have one to share, I may be re-entering the field, but in a very a more peaceful way. Let us say it was always peaceful, but peaceful for me. It kind of drove me crazy. So
yes.
What?
Well, it probably has to do it. So I'm a book of rules at book_of_rules on X. So if you want to check out my posts, and also it's also quite easy to join spaces there. So you might enjoy it or hate it, but anyway, my posts are on X if you want the written stuff. Is all I'm trying to say. And I won't keep you from your sleep anymore. Thank you for coming and asking your questions. And I think I did say a few new things to you.
Absolutely, Claire. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much. You have a lovely day there, okay?
Yes, thank you, and the same to you. Have a good night's sleep.
All right, my dear. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye. Right, I will. Oh my goodness, it's nearly come up to the 3rd hour. I will. I'll carry on reading the comments and trying and answering your questions. So yes, so slavery is the answer to the welfare state, the burgeoning welfare state, creating an ever greater group of social parasites. So slavery is the best form of workfare. Workfare is the idea that you make people who get benefits work for it. What better system is there but slavery? And you don't have to be mean to the slave. You can treat them properly, give them an account. In the UK, we have a Department of Work and Pensions, and I'm proposing a Department of Work, Pensions and Manumissions. Skyworks is wondering what I will wear for my first media interview. I haven't really quite decided yet. I sort of think I would, get fashion advice and, maybe take the opportunity of, supporting some British clothes designer for women's wear who will design the best clothes for elegance and modesty. So I don't know which one that is. If I get my media interview, I guess I'll, surf around and see what I would like to wear. Will it have a cape? I rather like the idea of a cape. Okay, so Western War Eagle was saying something about Mexicans. So Mexicans have ethnically cleansed Protestants out of South Central Los Angeles. DigiCowboy, what do you mean? If you made YouTube's videos talking to the camera discussing your beliefs, you would blow up. Oh, you mean I have to show myself? Oh no. Oh, people need visual stimulation, and StreamYard is way too niche for the masses. Well, StreamYard can... Well, they can... Well, you could see me if I enable the camera. I mean, there are pictures of me online anyway. But okay, your suggestion is noted. Yeah, I sort of think there are quite a few people who know about secular Koranism. I mean, I don't have a set time for streaming. I can't. I'm not organized enough to stream on a certain time on a certain day. It's kind of ad hoc, as and when. Obviously, I will if somebody says I would like to stream with you on, Sundays between 7 and 8, as Khalid used to, or Thursdays between 11:30 and 12:30, and then it's done. But obviously, I need somebody prepared to do this conversation, do this dialogue with me. But if you're at all interested in anything I say, just subscribe to my channel and view my videos. I also think that my channel has been suppressed anyway, but that doesn't... Well, yes, it does matter, but as for how easy my idea is to understand, I think, most people can understand the full horror of it in a few sentences. I am proposing Sharia for non-Muslims in the West. So, off they go after running out of the door screaming and maybe coming back in again, a bit later to see if I'm still saying the same thing. So it's not hard for them to understand. But they think, in her dreams, who's going to make it happen, whose army is going to make it happen. And it's not so much the army as, which media outlet is going to interview me. I mean, of course, it can't be just some... well, it could be just some YouTuber. I mean, a much bigger YouTuber. But the dissident right YouTubers are, either too Islamophobic, too to trust themselves to discuss the idea rationally. In fact, I know they have argued, they have conspired with each other never to mention secular Koranism, even though they all know about it, because they think if they just ignore me, I'll go away. I mean, you know, I can read their minds, right? It's not like they don't understand or they don't know what I'm talking about. You know, basically, they would rather die than admit I'm right, or even if they admit that they're right, they won't be sticking their necks out and saying, "Oh, hey, maybe we should um, allow Claire to give a talk on secular Koranism." I mean, you know, will they do that? I think it's possible. It's possible in theory. Will it help? I suppose so. I mean, you know, in terms of my morale and, you know, the word getting round, and maybe it will be recorded. In fact, the last one was recorded. And then that was at the Extremist Club. And I mean, obviously, the Extremist Club was such a mixture of poetry readings and, you know, films and a bit of politics. So you just had to spend, you know, all your time just listening to this mishmash of interest when really we just want it to be a political meeting. And okay, that's what we want. What we need are people brave enough to say, this is a political meeting, we're only going to discuss politics, and the topic of the day is secular Koranism, pros and cons, and, you know, the practicalities of implementing secular Koranism, or just something like that, you know, in a business-like way with an agenda and minutes and a record of the minutes, you know, just some formal structure, not, we don't like our government, could it be the Jews? Oh, we better not say the J word. Oh, we don't like the Muslims. Oh, and we don't like the blacks and the yellows and the browns. You know, it's got to be more than that, and more businesslike than that. But I think a lot of the dissident right do not see their role as political activists, but they see themselves as YouTubers, there to grift the most income they can get, and they know that they could be demonetized without notice or explanation for saying the wrong thing or discussing the wrong subject. So they are very careful indeed, and they just, you know, make their snide comments about certain groups, and then the people who come and listen to them just sort of like the atmosphere, the environment, and they just come to interact with each other in the chat, and that's it. So Skymark says, you don't need a religion, you need goodly men and women. Where do you think goodly men and women come from? Where do you think the values of goodly men and women come from? They come from patriarchal moral values of truth, logic, and principle. He goes on to say, how can he insult a non-existent non-entity? So he's talking about God and the commandment against blasphemy. I would say that the Quran actually says in chapter 17, verse 111, that God doesn't need blasphemy laws. That is how I would interpret it. So God is saying, you don't need to worry about my feeling readings. I don't mind if you question my existence and confuse me with Jesus, or say all kinds of things that normal people would be offended if you said it about them. I will let you blaspheme and practice idolatry, and you will end up in hell because sin, the punish. How does it go? The sin of idolatry is its own punishment, and we can see how Westerners are being punished. They're all, confused and fearful, and blaming Jews and blaming Muslims, and can't see the root, the wood for the trees, because They are confused and fearful and refusing to acknowledge their mistakes. But once they acknowledge their mistakes and understand what is meant by the rule of law, which is wanting to obey the law because it is the law, because you trust in the source of the law, i.e., God. Someone was asking me the other day if I would ask you if you would be willing to discuss your views with Dave, the channel owners of Working Class Patriot. Yes, of course, I'd be happy to discuss secular Koranism with people. He's a guy that has adopted Christianity. Of course, I will happily. In a way, I am like E. Michael Jones. I will talk to anybody, right? Because this would be an opportunity for proselytization, and anybody making an inquiry will be sure to get an answer. So E. Michael Jones, he does talk to nobodies, because he believes in his solution. Though I question it myself, because I'm saying, oh, you're an American. What you going to do to make Catholicism do the things you want it to do? You need America to become a monarchy, and a Catholic monarchy at that, that obeys the Pope, right? And then you can, conduct an inquisition, which is what E. Michael Jones has said he wanted to do. Or that's my memory of him saying that. He was saying he would forcibly convert Jews to Catholicism, and then he said darkly that Jews are not the only people that he would forcibly convert to Catholicism. So, Protestants, have a think about this proposal of E. Michael Jones to conduct an inquisition of Jews and Protestants. Are you sure you want to support that? Well, with Sharia for non-Muslims, i.e. secular Koranism, your First Amendment is protected and supported. And in fact, I'm just going to associate secular Koranism with the First Amendment. And any country, any European country that adopts it will get its own First Amendment. What's not to like about that? And for all you men whinging about feminism, you'll have a system of rules that will deal with your problem of feminism. What is there not to like? And for those who can't afford a house, obviously the banning of usury would be a tremendous opportunity for individuals and governments to default on their loans, right? There's all kinds of goodies for people who don't even believe in Allah. So what is your problem? Why are you withholding your support from this idea, this legal system, which is not a religion that would solve so many of your economic, social, and political problems? Why do you persist in your refusal to give me a platform? So I look forward to speaking to, what's his name, Working Class Patriot. So I'll have a look at his channel. Thank you for drawing my attention to it. Skywork says, the Big Bang was not a creation, it was an occurrence, an event from which the universe formed. But it's the same thing. You just want to say, you don't want to say creation, because then you see the logic of, if there was a creation, there must have been a creator, right? So you can avoid it, and then you sort of mince your words and say, oh, that was when the universe began to expand. It's like, yeah, we know what you mean, and you're using these verbs in order to exclude the possibility of there being a creator by denying the creation. But there's a verse in the Quran describing the creation. So this is actually a question for Western War Eagle. I think he's saying that he's agnostic and but he finds more in common with Catholics and Jews. Hopefully, he will talk to Muslims because look, I'm saying there's only one Abrahamic God. Right, there is only one Abrahamic God, and the religious squabbles of Jews, Christians, and Muslims are basically these groups saying, "My way of worshipping, our way of worshipping God is best of all." That's all they're saying. So, as an objective bystander, surely you know which to choose if you're a Gentile. In fact, you would also know which religion to choose that isn't Judaism if you were Jewish, right? As a Jew, you would stand a better chance of remaining Jewish if you lived under Sharia than if you lived under a liberal democracy. So I don't think he's Christian Orthodox. So obviously he has taken an interest in Orthodox YouTubers, but I don't think it's a good idea to convert to Orthodox Christianity. I've spoken to a few of them, and they're very strict. And actually, if you're an Orthodox Christian, you're not even supposed to enter a place of worship of any other church apart from your Orthodox Christian church. So it's very, very strict. And obviously, you're not supposed to marry anyone other than another Orthodox Christian. And also, if the government decides to crack down on you, all they have to do is go to an Orthodox Christian church and demand a list of the new converts, and they so that's what white nationalists are doing now. These domestic extremists and these domestic potential domestic terrorists. I mean, you're just putting labels on yourselves by the words you use to describe yourselves. So, but if you said secular Koranism, it's like, oh, we haven't really heard of that. We're not even officially supposed to know about that. There's no Wikipedia entry about secular Koranism, even though quite a lot of these AI are quite knowledgeable. Apart from DeepSeek, which is sort of weird about it and won't even credit me with being the inventor, the creator of secular Koranism, but I would say Copilot is very good, Grok is very good, and those are the top two. So if you have questions, you want to ask about secular Koranism, and you don't want to ask me again, try AI. Skywork says, you're persuaded by betas and incels masquerading as alphas while having a poor understanding of the mind and the cosmos. Now, on the question of alpha and beta, it's very simple. Betas need to choose their alpha male leader. And that's it, really. Alpha male means leader of beta males. I don't think there's anyone remotely fitting that category in the dissident right. I guess apart from, interestingly enough, E. Michael Jones and Nick Fuentes and Donald Trump, exhibiting alpha male characteristics by saying what they believe to be the truth and being reasonably consistent on their positions. Yon God says, ignoring consent is a viable reproduction strategy, and therefore abortion will always exist. Okay, so he's assuming that women in need of abortion claim that they were raped. Is that what you're saying? Or you need the consent of the fetus? Of course, you won't. It would be able to give it to you. Actually, I'm not sure what you're saying. Your God says Judaism and Christianity are sister religions developed side by side. I mean, you could say that Jews helped in the development of Christianity. Because of Paul, who basically made a marketing decision to sell the Jesus worship to Gentiles who won't have such inhibitions about worshipping a man. Why are you mentioning Leviticus 20:13? Okay, what does it say? If a man lies with a man as one lies with a woman, both of them have done what is detestable. They must be put to death. Their blood will be on their own heads. Yes, well, it's quite harsh, right? And Sharia is not that harsh compared to executing sodomites. So young God think you don't lay with a man as you do with a woman, you lay with a man as you would with a man. Yes. Clever, you on guard. Are you saying Khalid is poorly educated and afflicted by bad judgment? I wouldn't agree, because I'm promoting Sharia, right? And it is necessary for any society that wishes to remain in existence is to support the eugenic practice of marriage, or you will become an aging and shrinking society complaining about uncontrolled mass migration. Skyworks, I will mention that when you say males and females are complementary partners, I think we mean complementary with an E, with two E's, I should say. So it should be COMPLEMENTRATARY. Now, I can't provide any evidence to prove that my channel is being suppressed. I can't prove it at all. It's just a feeling. I imagine that YouTube will not be promoting my channel because they might be instructed to suppress my ideas. And why wouldn't they? I am proposing to overthrow the established order, am I not? So I have finally come to I've got another comment to comment on. Good men and women do not come from religions alone. They arise from having a good understanding of forces and integrity. You're just, again, you're ignoring where all these values come from. So you might as well just accept that, it is religion that says, you are the people who believe in X, and you are the people who always do Y and never do Z. What's your problem with that? And you know, whether God exists or not, nobody's forcing you to believe in God, but you have to obey the law of the land, which will be based on the Quran. What's your problem other than your Islamophobia, which I guess is a big problem? Thank you, Yoav, for your second comment. The thing is, with regard to sodomy, I think, you know, it's pretty clear that, and quite established, that sodomites do get stoned in the Talmud and the Torah. And sadly, some Muslims think that this is what needs to be done, when in fact it doesn't really say that. They just like the harshness of Old Testament punishments, even though their Quran does not support it. They just, you know, I guess a lot of caliphs wanted to harshen up the Quran because it was just too liberal, right? Not even killing these sodomites. That won't do. Let's go back to Old Testament punishments. Right, I have spoken for over 3 hours. I am a little surprised at how much I have to say. I hope most of it was not just me being boring and repetitive. I'm glad I had the opportunity of mentioning Arthur A. Goldberg, who was trying to impress on Congress that the Torah forbade sodomy, because he was very upset that his only son was being gay. And Congress told him to go jump in a lake. And when he set up a chain of conversion therapy clinics, he was sued for fraud. And when he tried to appeal to the federal court, he was prevented from doing so by the New Jersey Supreme Court. So thank you all for coming. I hope I did manage to cover new territory, and hopefully you will be seeing me soon on, I'll just go back to that comment about, what's his name? I can't find it now. Yes. Working Class Patriot, Dave's channel. So maybe I'll be appearing on there soon, hopefully, to spread my message of Sharia for non-Muslims as a way of restoring good government and the patriarchy for the good of Westerners and non-Westerners all over the world. Thank you for your attention.